Come with soft focus as we clarify that which was obfuscated. When all is said and done, when rock and roll has wrung out its final chord, people will look back wistfully and wonder, what was it all about? Was it just a bunch of noise? People will ponder the intentions of its actors, of its labor force, what its purpose was, its use, its role in society. To answer these questions, Soft Focus has attempted to put on record the articulate progenitors of the form for the sake of bewildered people of the future. Tonight, we speak with Ted Leo, fabulous singer, guitar player, composer with the group The Pharmacists. I really can't wait to speak with him.
Soft Focus. Soft Focus.
Thanks a lot for being here with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So how do you feel about this, the collapse of capitalism? Are you excited?
I am pretty excited. I think that I'm not entirely sure that I'm in a completely recession-proof profession. Either way, I'll be happy to watch it crumble.
Well, this leads to my first question, or my second question, which is, I saw you perform the other night, and it was great. But I noticed that there's a new direction in your work. It feels a little more punk.
You consider that a new direction? I mean, I guess it is to a certain degree.
Well, it felt more punk.
Yeah. Sonically, at least, a lot of what we're working on is a lot simpler right now.
Simpler.
Go back to the basics.
So yeah, how would you define punk? The term punk.
I mean,
simple.
You can define it relatively easily in terms of what it's not. It's never been a coherent ideology. It's always been, largely about kind of sartorial choices that signify otherness from parent culture. It's kind of this ongoing, frisson in the young and not so young person's mind between altruistic impulses for the furtherance of the evolution of humanity that tend toward socialistic impulses, rubbing up against fierce libertarian streak of self-determination.
That's interesting. Because I was thinking that punk was more of a, no, I like that definition.
Thanks.
It's good. But I was thinking of punk as a more like a dislike for professionalism, a kind of embracing of amateurism. And I was thinking that maybe Sarah Palin was going to be the first punk president.
Yeah.
Unless George Bush was the first punk president. Because another thing I was thinking about punk, that maybe it was just novelty music when it started.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Sex Pistols record was misfiled. It was supposed to be next to the Weird Al record. But what do you think of that?
I would disagree, because I think that musically, I mean, if you really want to talk about the Sex Pistols record, we can. I think that musically, it's a record that I think actually holds up just as great rock and roll, And part of that initial impulse, both here and across the pond, I think, was simply a return to the kind of exuberance of fresh rock and roll,
Well, maybe all rock and roll is novelty music.
Well, but I mean, that's like an endlessly extrapolatable, thing. I mean, then
maybe music.
what's yeah, exactly. What's not novelty about,
Well, maybe you're right.
The Brandenburg concertos,
That's true. Well, I did want to talk to you, since we're talking about politics a little bit. You just played the Democratic National Convention.
We played a party we didn't play the official convention, yeah.
Well, I was wondering, like, in a similar sense of defining terms, if you were to try to explain the difference between a Democrat and a Republican, how would you do it?
The kind of strict definitions of liberal and conservative are completely upended when you talk about them in relation to the two parties. See, it's a lie to say that Republicans don't want government involvement in prescribing, social behaviors. The Republican Party has its own social agenda that it's more than willing to regulate. Exactly. So it just comes down to these specific issues. Just inevitably, like it really does describe, almost just two personality types.
Yeah, because it seems to me like an aesthetic difference.
Yeah.
Like a Republican is someone who thinks everybody else is having sex.
But don't
and is angry about it.
You don't think the Republicans have? Well, I think they are angry.
Well, yeah,
about it.
but
don't you picture a lot of angry sex in Republican bedrooms?
Yeah, but they think other people are having more sex.
That might be.
And then a Democrat is somebody with a calendar with a cat on it.
Yeah. See, I don't know the Republicans are jealous of Democratic sex lives. I think that they probably still see it as like dirty, hippie, smelly, patchouli sex, and they actually want like, office clothes off, on the desk kind of sex,
Like in that LL Cool J song, that new one.
I haven't heard it.
It's quite ribald. Well, Sammy Davis Jr., of course, said the first rule of show business is leave them wanting more.
I'm trying to learn more about that, actually.
Yeah.
Because I tend to just be too like, here's everything that I've got. I'm going to give it all to you
Michael
for
Jackson,
the entire, until I, collapse.
Yeah, like Michael Jackson talked about, James Brown taught me how to leave stage. And I'm like, but I don't know how Michael Jackson leaves stage.
He probably left stage like James Brown.
I know, but I have no idea what that was. I guess dancing.
Yeah, dancing off stage.
On one foot. Well, you move around constantly.
Yeah.
You're like a nomad.
I have.
A hobo.
And yeah.
You're on tour pretty much most of the year. Most years. Is there something about movement that you need to think?
I kind of prefer to not examine that usually, because when I start to, I realize that it's not really a healthy way to be. And it also, I think, just has a lot to do with the paradigms of bands and what they are that I grew up with. And I know that you grew up with as well, where it's just like, that's what you do, that's what like the Minutemen did, that's what you guys did. You get in a van and you go and you play shows. At that time especially, there was no real outlet for broadcasting. It was largely in the live context that it actually happened, and so that's what you did. I've certainly probably missed the boat on transitioning into into the new world to a certain degree, but
That's the thing. If you wait long enough, there's a whole new world.
Whole new world coming around the corner. Yeah, that's true. And things move faster these days.
The internet's old-fashioned now.
Yeah.
Nobody uses it.
That's right.
Anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in this. This is something I'm going to say, is that in the old days, underground music, or so-called underground music, punk maybe, seemed very angry. A lot of people were very angry. Mm-hmm. And not only them, but other groups like Tears for Fears, people like that. There was this anger in music. And you don't really see that anger anymore. There doesn't seem to be anger. Maybe I'm just not hearing the right groups, the right angry groups. But what it made me think that was that maybe people were angry about the lack of access. And now that there's a perception that everybody has the same access as Madonna with the internet, mm-hmm. that nobody's angry anymore. What do you think of that?
I think that is valid for the people who aren't angry. But I also think that there's plenty of angry music. I also think that angry music itself has become kind of prepackaged, another thing that you can just tap into. I mean, the amount of bands that are just like, let the bodies hit the floor, I'm angry, like, they're everywhere. That's been the last 10 years, and...
See, I guess I don't listen to music.
Well, yeah, but...
I mean, recently.
Yeah, and well, I would love to say that I didn't know that let the bodies hit the floor existed, but I know it exists. I don't know, maybe those guys really are angry about something. It seems to me like it's just a bit of a, kind of tough guy pose, but who knows,
Well, there's still machismo.
That's what it is, you're right. That's machismo, that's not anger. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's more like...
Yeah. I concede. Yeah.
Well, okay, well, speaking of the internet, the Christians, at one point, they hated music. But now they love music. In fact, they've even sponsored Christian rock and roll. Do you think that Christians will sponsor a Christian pornography?
I doubt that Christians will ever sponsor Christian pornography. I would love to get a subscription to that kind of magazine personally.
I mean, they have probably a lot of the superstars, pornography superstars, right there in the church pew.
I bet you there is Christian porn.
Yeah.
That is sponsored by Christians.
It seems very Christian. Pornography seems very Christian.
Yeah. I mean, there was also a time when, you literally thought that, half of the music that's currently on the radio would never be on the radio,
Yes.
Once somebody realizes that something is a saleable commodity, it's sanctioned and becomes mainstream, And I'm sure that there's somebody out there who has some rationale about how they can, well, it's cool, we're bringing the message to a whole new group of people, we're using this way, there's beautiful women, we got, I'm sure that somebody can rationalize it.
Corinthians 14:12.
Yeah, it's God's creation.
They told us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It just seems really Christian, the whole Passion of the Christ and the woman in pornography.
Mm-hmm. Are you talking about more like in the veneration sense? Because that already exists in every little Catholic school kid's mind. It gets equated with their nascent, burgeoning sexuality.
Oh, really?
Sure. Christ on the cross, that's a sexy body he's got going on there, man. Yeah.
That's true. You went to Catholic school?
17 and a half years.
And then, yeah. So that, it gave you an affection for, I mean, you've carried that into a sort of your dress sense.
The way I dress?
You were a suit jacket.
Interesting, wow. That's good to know. Yeah, I suppose I have, yeah. Some grays, maroons, plaids.
Yeah, grays, maroons, they always look good. We used to live together.
Yeah.
And I remember, and at the time you were in a group.
I was in a group.
And then that group broke up, and for a while you were doing a one-person group. What did you learn from that experience?
I think that, it was a desire to kind of break free from the constraints of the history that I had established, or accrued. Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, actually, I think I did fall into a control trap. I lost the ability to delegate and to share in some ways. I think because I got so wrapped up in just making it to the next step as quickly as possible. Because when you're on your own, that's all you really need to worry about. Getting to the next city, doing the next record, whatever. And when you are in a group, not only can you ask others for help, which is sometimes hard to remember, but you can also let people in a little bit and have, see what happens.
Well, you're a Virgo, and the Virgo is a perfectionist.
And I'm stacked in all my houses, Virgo.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You live out in the country.
A little bit. It's sometimes, yeah. Uh-huh.
Are you in hiding from America?
It is a little bit of that, I suppose. Yeah. I don't, what it's about? It's about finding a space that you can actually kind of carve out as your own.
So safe from Americans, basically.
In part, absolutely, or just the kind of worm-like tendrils of those parts of culture that you don't.
Yeah.
Wish you didn't have to engage with.
Well, it's weird because, if you see Americans on television, they seem one way, but when you actually interact with them, they seem another way.
That's true.
There doesn't seem like very much, there's a real disconnect. Yeah. What do you think of that?
I think plenty of them also act like they do on television.
Oh, really?
Yeah, sure. And I think that television has informed that as well.
Yeah.
The way people act, Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. That's interesting because, George Bush was president of the United States for 8 years. And he has some sort of speech aphasia or something. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really made it difficult for other Americans to speak.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's definitely, it's influenced the way everybody speaks. Now nobody can form a sentence. Do you think that was a conspiracy?
I think absolutely it's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy to like just horribly, cynically manipulate the very people that Republicans purport to care about. Those who have been left behind by the modern economy. Those are the people that they obviously don't really care about, and they're completely manipulating, like the constant epithet of elitist, Northeastern elitist.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I went to school, I was taught the English language.
Yeah.
I have a thick Jersey accent, but
Yeah.
it's ridiculous, and it really does make you feel like a jerk for knowing what something.
Yeah, elitist means somebody's read a book. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean the elite.
And also, I'm not saying anything about different versions of the English language. That's why I love English so much. One reason is what a mutable and amazing vessel it is for
3 million words plus.
and it can accept anything and reshape itself in so many different ways.
It's bewilderingly complex.
Yes, and beautiful.
You write lyrics.
Yeah.
And do you find it difficult to reconcile your love for English with the kind of barbarity of rock and roll and the demands of the rock and roll song are for brevity and understandability?
Mm-hmm. No, I think actually it's a great way to hone your skill in being understandable and brief. I think that I'm still learning, how to say something, without saying it super floridly,
Yeah, it's a struggle. It's a struggle for us all.
It's a give and take.
Anyway, what about this text language, like lols
Texting.
and leet speak? I feel like maybe that's part of the militarism of culture. The military with their whole remph, foobar, fugazi, snafu, lols.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because we live in a culture that's becoming increasingly militarized.
Well, it also though is about the corporatization of everything. Because the military, when somebody had to send a handwritten note to a commander on the field, somebody was sitting in a tent with a quill, actually calligraphing, Dear General Westmoreland,
Yeah.
And so that was the military at one point in time. I think it's more like the corporatization.
That's what I
to
mean.
get
This
these
whole
things,
yeah, you're right. Under the corporate paradigm, everything is corporate. So the president acts like CEO, the general acts like CEO.
Yeah.
There's no
Exactly.
and rock and roll in a way is the last vestige of heroic gesture.
See, that's a very interesting point in general, because I think that, going back to differences between Democrats and Republicans, this is one area where it's kind of flipped in certain ways. I think that really conservative thought elements or whatever, tend to look for this heroic ideal, this kind of paradigm of the Viking. Fascist, exactly, and the kind of great man theory and whatnot. And it's really alluring, that's why we love all those movies and all those books and everything. And it's kind of the internal conflict between socialist and libertarian ideals, because there comes a point where, if you really don't want to accept complete fascism, then you have to temper those desires with a humanist, outlook.
Yeah. Well, you have this new song, something about you can't be too paranoid.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I know that you released it as a benefit record for victims of police abuse
during the RNC
Yes.
protests. Yeah, I'd been hearing about what was going on, but what struck me at this particular moment was that the media was actually picking up on it and showing indignation in a way that I don't think I've ever seen the media show indignation.
Somebody paid him off.
I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that journalists themselves were getting snatched
They
up.
love to talk about themselves.
Absolutely,
The journalists.
Yeah. But, what was interesting about it was also that journalists were just being swept up and smacked down, and just how egregious and blatant.
They deserve it.
But in the past, it would have been done clandestinely.
That's true.
And this is the thing. Now it's all out there. There's just no fear of accountability at all.
It's crazy that the Republicans want to treat journalists like that when they, the journalists are their friends.
Absolutely. So they'd be nowhere without them.
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
We are basically of the same generation. We've kind of seen the rise and fall of American power. When we were tots, America was at its greatest influence and wealth, maybe. And now we're just watching it sinking to the bottom. Do you think there's going to be a consciousness shift?
You really can't expect in this society that would continue whether or not we actually have a government in power, because it's all corporate run, you know. I mean, as long as the money keeps flowing around,
Yeah.
society will continue, you know. It's incremental steps, you know. And I think that in this particular case, if we're seeing a consciousness shift, it's a great first step toward that regard, you know, toward that.
Follow-up question. So if you were elected, I mean, think of how many people, if you actually wanted to affect some great change, think of how many people you'd have to throw into like a gulag.
Mm.
It boggles the mind.
It does, yeah.
It's just crazy.
I would do like Dave, you know, and I would like hire like the local accountant guy who fixes everybody's taxes, you know.
Wait, what?
The movie Dave.
Oh, yeah.
You know, think about like the local guy who like knows the ins and outs of every, you know, bit of the tax code, and he helps, you know, Joe Blow from the wherever, you know, like, you know, yeah, we're gonna get you this and that, and you know, blah blah blah, you know, like get that guy in, you know, don't get the guy who's in the pocket of
Yeah.
Monsanto or you know to be writing agricultural policy, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I'm talking about imprisoning like hundreds of thousands of people.
With certain left-leaning consciousness-shifting movements, that has certainly happened in the past, you know.
But what I'm saying is it has to happen.
Right. I know that's what you're saying.
Hey, it's wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody.